right, we'll get a few more stragglers in here. It's great to be back in New Hampshire. I'll get to that when I talk about my background. Thank you. So we're here to talk about sound money. I firmly believe this is the most important battle for liberty today, is the battle for sound money. Many of the other battles that you think we're in, it touches on those as well. Like when you talk about overseas wars and foreign intervention, you know, without sound money, that's going to continue to be a problem. So my background is, I studied Russian in high school, which is a bit odd, but as part of that, I visited the Soviet Union in '84 and '86, and also Ukraine, Tbilisi, Georgia, and my heart goes out to the people out there on both sides. And if you want to have a conversation about that offline, I'm happy to. But I saw communism firsthand, and I saw what that lack of freedom did to people and how it impacted them. And that instilled in me a very strong belief in free markets. And so I studied free markets and was a big believer, but it wasn't until 2007. Oh, and I was told I have to say this, which was always in my 2-minute floor speech. I wanted to defend against communism, so I joined the military as a pilot, and I was so effective within 2 weeks the wall came down. And I want to remind people we were there to defeat communism, not to defeat the Russians. We were there to defeat communism, which we did. So in 2007, I met Ron Paul actually at this Liberty Forum, and I was incredibly impressed with him and kind of lost my mind in terms of going to campaign for him. But he introduced me to sound money, and so I'm very grateful for that. And he endorsed me to run for Congress without asking me whether that was cool or not. And so I started a congressional run, and it wasn't the right time, so I backed out, and I used some of the funds that I gave them back or gave them to some great state reps, which I've bumped into some today and thanked me for that, for contributing to those campaigns. But then in 2010, I ran for state senate. I was Americans for Prosperity A+ rated, education tax credits, the prime sponsor on that, and Greg, the House sponsor, did a fantastic job helping me out with that, and Kate Rick, Kate Baker, Demers. You know, very proud of what she's done since then with that, and very proud of the legislature for continuing to that. Only Republican-controlled House to pass medical marijuana, which was then vetoed by a Democratic governor. Okay, so if you want to stereotype Republicans, you can't do it in New Hampshire. Something I look back on is our Lyme disease bill, which basically said it should be up to doctors. If they want to prescribe long-term antibiotics, it's up to doctors. If only we had some of that logic during COVID. Then in 2012, as a sitting New Hampshire state senator, I became Ron Paul's New Hampshire campaign chair. Got to sit on stage with him. So time went by. I had to go back to make an income, and I moved to Southern Maryland. But recently, I saw a real opportunity. You know, when the silver squeeze kicked off, and you may or may not, that's related to GameStop, basically. Our time was now. And so Marianne Ward and I started Citizens for Sound Money, a nonprofit, and that started to take off extremely well. And so I quit my job so I could focus on that. Quit my main job, I should say. I got like 3. So why is this important? You got to talk about what non-sound money is, or another what fiat it is. First off, it's half of every transaction, other than barter's kind of tough to do in general. But the money printing, what it does is it steals your labor. So they can steal your labor. If you have savings that you've earned all your life, they can steal your savings. And a bunch of pensioners are about to find that out, unfortunately. Recently, we're seeing it's even worse than that. You could be locked out of society. Okay, if you're in Canada and you're upset about things, they can freeze your bank accounts. And now we're seeing not only can do that at a personal level, but they can do it to an entire country. Just that money you have, that's no good. And other countries will look around and go, well, if they can do it to us, they can do it to Iran, they can do it to Russia, they can do it to anyone. So the fiat is political money. The dollar is political money. It's a weapon that is used against other societies. And that's bad enough, but now they're moving towards central bank digital currencies, okay? Which is what they did to foreign countries, they will do to people. What they did in Canada, they can do very easily. and tie that into social credit scores. They don't like what you're posting on Twitter, and you can get shut out. Our nonprofits had a hard time getting payment processors. And we started to kind of clean our website of referencing some of the things that we're advocating for, and we said, wait, what are we doing? Screw that. We're gonna do our business using gold and silver, blockchain, and forget about traditional payment processors. So if you want to interact with us, do not send us dollars. The other big thing is the wealth disparity. If you go WTF 1971, you'll see that. And my best example of how this happens is, what interest rate do you think, JP Morgan is borrowing at? They're borrowing close to 0%. You go start a small business, which I'm doing, ask what the rates were. They're 9%. Okay, your credit card rate's 12%. Heck, I could make money if I could borrow at 0 and lend at 12. I mean, that's easy. Okay, and that's kind of why the current system was put in place, is exactly for that reason. So the banks could make money off of us. So this battle began over 100 years ago. And for those that haven't read The Fourth Turning, I recommend reading it. I think we are there now, which is 100 things happen in these 100-year cycles, and there becomes the time in history where you have to have a big paradigm shift and a big battle, and I think we are there. And I think what happened with GameStop to me, I thought was the start of that. Before 1913, gold, silver were money. You could deposit them at the bank, get a paper certificate. You could then use that to pay because it was more convenient than carrying your gold and silver around. Banks were local. They might, leverage up a little bit too much. If they did, they could go bankrupt and you could lose your deposits, unfortunately. But the competition between the banks kept things relatively honest. And boom bust cycles happened, but they were not completely out of hand. Now, if you read Creature from Jekyll Island, and I totally subscribe to this theory, is when the banks are seeing what was happening is people in America were getting wealthier and wealthier. They didn't need to borrow to buy things. Remember layaway? Is anybody old enough to remember buying things on layaway? So they didn't need to borrow. The banks weren't making as much money, and so in comes the Federal Reserve. And it's no surprise that, or it's not a coincidence, I think, that was passed in 1913, same time as an income tax was. So what the Federal Reserve did is artificially controlled interest rates, right? They should be set by the markets, but instead they would artificially set those low interest rates, lead to an increase in the lending, leverage ratio gets out of hand. So the fractional reserve went from 2 to 1, 3 to 1, up to 10 to 1, where there was 10 times the money loaned as the underlying money. That led to the Roaring 20s, the big credit expansion. Everybody felt rich, they weren't, that burst, and then you got the Great Depression. So a really great start for the Federal Reserve to immediately cause the Great Depression. Okay, and all the other reasons people give you are BS. Okay, it's the Federal Reserve. Solution to that, let's make gold illegal. Okay, get the gold back at the time. So for today, if you think, are they going to do that? Well, at the time, remember, the dollar was gold. It was redeemable for gold. So saying, oh, we need the liquidity back in the system, bring your gold back, we'll give you the dollars back. People are like, okay, I did that a couple years ago. It's no big deal. Although a lot of people did keep theirs. But then FDR then immediately takes the dollar from $20 an ounce to $35 an ounce. So immediately you lost purchasing power of the gold that you turned back. Okay, so time goes on. Then you have, after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement, where we became the world reserve currency because we had most of the gold. Okay, so Americans couldn't redeem dollars for gold, but foreign countries could. So then you have the guns and butter policies of Johnson and others, where we were spending like crazy. Foreign countries are seeing that, saying, boy, they're borrowing a lot of money, spending a lot of money. We better redeem our dollars for gold. Okay, and they started to do that. And so the gold flowed out of the United States into foreign countries. And in 1971, Nixon closed the gold window, temporarily, of course. And you can imagine that when you do that, that's quite a bit of a credibility hit to the dollar. So how do you keep people to use the dollar? Well, you make a negotiation with the oil selling countries and say you will only accept oil. You only sell your oil for dollars. Okay, and that's the birth of the petrodollar system. So to say the dollar's not backed, or it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States, it's really backed by oil. And the fact that countries would only sell dollars for oils. Now, if you look at some of the military engagements since then, some of which I was unfortunately involved in, a lot of this is to defend the petrodollar, right? Saddam Hussein started trading oil for something other than dollars. Iran is doing that, and we're sanctioning them. Russia's starting to trade with China, with different currencies, and so a lot of this has been, in my opinion, well, if you look at Gaddafi, he was starting to look at gold currencies in Africa. In the Ukraine situation, there are certainly tendencies there. So that all sounds pretty doom and gloom, right? But I'm actually, a lot of the things I listen to are doom and gloom, but in my opinion, there's excellent news here, which is, there is a solution, and this is a turning point, and it's our time to take back, our freedoms, and do that by using sound money. So there's a Czech dissident, I can't pronounce his name, but Havel's his last name. He proposed using a parallel system when he was a dissident in communist occupied Czechoslovakia. He encouraged people to create parallel systems, right? So the equivalent here is there is the dollar, but we can create a parallel system. And I'm glad to see like gold money out there, the heavy metals construction, that's what these guys are trying to do, is create a parallel system. And I applaud that. So the interesting thing here is that many people solving the issue themselves. In other words, you just go protect your assets, get some assets into sound money, get money out of the dollar. If everybody does that, that may seem greedy, but by everybody doing that, we solve the problem. Okay, and that's really the beautiful thing about this. I'm a big believer that we don't need government to adopt sound money, and for a long time I was like, we need the dollar to be backed by gold again. We need the dollar to be backed by gold. But if we did that, they just mess it up again, right? And we don't need it. The government did not create money. Money was created originally from barter transactions and realizing, well, I want what this guy has, but I don't have what he needs, but this person does. Well, let's find a medium of exchange. Okay, something portable, recognizable, something fungible, can be divided into smaller parts, and gold and silver naturally arose from that, by the people, not by governments. Governments would then get involved in coining, and then get involved in, like the Romans, and then diluting the coinage so that they could spend more money. They've always messed it up. They didn't create money, and we should not look to them for the solution. They just hijack and corrupt it. The other reason why I say there's good news is because of what happened with Bitcoin and the crypto space. Blockchain presents an amazing opportunity for us to readopt sound money in a way that's much better than the paper standard that happened before the Federal Reserve that was very easy to fake. Now you've got blockchain that you can help make sure that things remain one-to-one. So that brings us to Citizens for Sound Money. What are we about? So our goal is to, in a nutshell, is to encourage the use of sound money and protect people's right to do so. Our goal is not to get the government to adopt sound money, it's to encourage people to use it and protect their right to do so. So how do you use sound money today? Okay, like I said, crypto, the invention of the blockchain was really a shot across the bow. So crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. I get asked constantly, are these sound money? And the answer is, to me, it depends on the people. Okay, sound money, it needs to be finite so that it can't be devalued. Bitcoin, Ethereum certainly do that. My only issue is those do depend on the network effect, right? So for Bitcoin to remain finite, that means you can't have other similar things come up and dilute Bitcoin or Ethereum. So it does depend on the network effect. The network effect is extremely powerful, but it can be powerful on the way down as well. So I view these as speculative sound money. There are potential sound money. I mean, they meet the criteria if used broadly. The fact that they're speculative means they have great upside. Now, my campaign manager in 2010 told me about Bitcoin, and I thought it was genius, but I thought it needed, be backed by a tangible asset, and I still believe that. But I made the mistake I made was not realizing, the futures market in gold, which I'll get to, was going to keep gold from serving its role for a while until that gets broken or fixed, depending on how you look at it. And so Bitcoin's kind of been the fire alarm that hasn't been silenced, unlike gold and silver. In any case, if you're involved in crypto, that we are supportive of those efforts. Like I said, the people decided what money was to begin with. If they decide crypto is money as well, I think that's within their right. And as long as those cryptos are finite, they can serve that role. But I would urge people to diversify into traditional sound monies that have served as a store of value for thousands of years. In any case, crypto, gold, and silver are allies. They are not enemies. And I hate the drop gold stuff that the crypto guys did. I hate the gold people bashing on crypto. They are definitely allies against fiat. So in terms of what I mentioned about gold and silver and the manipulation of the futures market, this was a State Department memo that I think it was leaked later on. It was hidden for a while, but it was leaked later on. So remember, we just went off the Nixon closes the gold window, makes the petrodollar negotiation. They're really worried about a flock from dollars to gold and silver. So here's the memo from the State Department. The major impact of private U.S. ownership, according to dealers' expectations, will be the formation of a sizable gold futures market. Each of the dealers expressed the belief that the futures market would be of significant proportion and physical trading would be minuscule by comparison. Also expressed was the expectation that large volume futures dealing would create a highly volatile market. In turn, the volatile price movements would diminish the initial demand for physical holding and most likely negate long-term hoarding by the U.S. citizens. In other words, the futures market is there to create volatility, to scare people away from holding physical. Oh, sorry. Thank you. So whether or not you believe people literally manipulate the futures market, and the fact that $4 billion of gold was dumped on a quiet Sunday evening, I think, I was never a big believer it was manipulated until the last year or so. But in any case, the very existence of it, in other words, a highly leveraged gold market, creates volatility and discourages people from saving. I think that is going to break. That's what Silver Squeeze was all about, and that's continuing. And silver was targeted because it's a smaller market than gold, so it's easier to do. And when I say break, it may not literally break. It's just their physical. There's so many redemptions. Their physical holdings are drawn down so much that they're forced to let the price rise because the demand is there. There was an interesting article that essentially Putin could do this overnight. He basically says, we're only selling our oil for gold at this price and make that price lower than the price of the futures market. Everybody rushes to the futures market to get gold and it's done. So I talked about blockchain, and that's where gold and silver has traditionally been a role of money, but blockchain allows a great opportunity. And our organization, working with another gentleman, Nate, came up with the name Asset-Backed Digital Currencies, ABDCs. We got a great T-shirt out there because some people might call it a stable coin, but stable coin has a certain connotation now that you see USDT and the issues involved in that. So we wanted to call it asset-backed digital currencies. But basically it's blockchain, gold, silver. So it's got a lot of the advantages of crypto, ease of transfer, divisibility. It's got the advantages of gold and silver. It's tied to a much larger physical market and therefore provides more stability, even though the futures market does add volatility. For us to consider it to be asset-backed digital currency, it needs to be one-to-one, backed by one-to-one tokens versus physical allocated gold or silver. It also needs to be redeemable. So this is not a competition to things like gold money. This is a complement to it. If you can redeem for physical, then you can use it for local transactions, and that's an important key. because you need to have that cash side to this. So there's a number of different systems. They in general and or in the future can be used with a debit card to interface with the US dollar system. So that's the mistake a lot of people make is they say, well, I gotta have dollars to pay for stuff. That's true. That doesn't mean you have to save in it, right? You should not be saving in dollars. You should be saving in something that can withstand the test of time. And so by tying it to a debit card, you can pay for something in dollars, but yet have it sell a little bit of your gold to pay for that at the time of the transaction. Now, systems like these do introduce counterparty risk, okay? There's no denying that. And that's an argument I get in with Bitcoin, people saying, well, you have a counterparty. Bitcoin doesn't have a counterparty. It's like, yes, you have a physical asset. So it's apples and oranges comparison. So I believe, in terms of our nonprofit, we believe that because of that, we want a good market. We don't want one single asset-backed digital currency to be the solution. We want many of them, just like the local banks back in the day, so that they can compete with each other to keep them honest. The neat thing about these systems is they add a network effect to gold and silver, right? When you can start paying people in gold and silver, not just in local barter, but around the world, that adds an incredible network effect. So I'll give you some example of the kind of things that we've been seeing, that we've been actively participating in. So like I said, there's a number of these systems. The one we're most actively working with is Kinesis. It's somewhat unique. It pays a holder's yield via fee sharing. So I think of it like a what do you call it? Credit union. Credit union. There you go. Right. So 0.22% exchange fees, 0.45% transfer fees, which are relatively low, especially compared to a credit card. Those fees go into a pool. 15% of those fees get paid back out to holders in proportion of their holdings. So gold recently has been about a 1% annualized yield. Silver about a 0.2%. Not incredibly high, but better than a money market, and the underlying assets gold and silver. I tweeted that I bought a grill with silver, and I got the response, why did you sell your silver? Why did you sell your silver? And I said, because I don't have any dollars. Like, why are you holding dollars? Right? So it's incredibly liberating to be able to use gold and silver as money, even when the people you're buying from have no idea that you're doing it. We have a business that's moving the majority of its assets. It has moved the majority of its assets into Kinesis because they didn't trust the banks and because they weren't getting a yield. And they said, well, we can get a yield this way. There's an investment fund that we've been working with that is paying its dividends in gold and silver through Kinesis. Getting its members into the system, and you can take it in cash, but we'll pay you in gold and silver instead. Our organization paid for the development of a plugin, Kryptonic. It's used with WooCommerce, which requires WordPress, but you can sell things using gold and silver through Kinesis or Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, BCH, a number of others. And the plugin is neat because there's a lot of payment systems like that, but they take their cut. This one, it's very simple, but it's when the people send through this, it goes into your account, and that's it. There's no fee taken. So if there's any vendors interested in that, please talk to us. The CBD oil that you saw at our booth out there, that's someone who's using this plugin in order to sell online using gold and silver. There's a silver bullion business I'm involved in that also sells silver for silver. So you can pay in Kinesis KAG and receive a physical slab of silver in the mail, or a 10-ounce round, which goes back towards the redemption. If you want to take some of this digital currency out of the system, you can go use it to get coins or bars. So I have rushed through this, but let me conclude with, again, reiterating, this is the battle for liberty. The biggest portion of the battle for liberty is reasserting the use of sound money, and doing it by just doing it yourself, getting your friends and family to do it, without having to fight the government on it. But if they start coming after, everything that we're doing right now is there's nothing illegal about any of it, it's totally fine. But if they start coming after these systems, then we want to be there to defend them. So I urge you to sign up. We have a newsletter that goes out. So Citizens for Sound Money with the number 4.org. So citizensforsoundmoney.org. You can sign up on there, and that'll keep you in the loop. We also have a YouTube channel with a lot of educational content with a number of these different systems. And then also there's a sign-up sheet that's over at our booth that if you sign up, we will send you an ounce of Kinesis digital silver. And you can actually turn around and send that back and get the CBD oil if you want to, from Bravo Botanicals. For those acting locally, like Goldbucks is, what was it, heavy metals, I forgot the other one. So for you guys, if you wanted to, you could sell your product for gold and silver and not have to worry about the price changing, right? Sell Goldbucks for KAU, silver, gold goes up, no problem. You sell the KAU and buy some replacement Goldbucks to sell again. So that's another thing that you can do. And I think that's critical for local people to be able to have a means for people to transfer these digital assets into physical sound money assets that you can use locally in terms of barter. I paid for landscaping with 3 ounces of silver, 3 ounces of gold. Yeah, no, it wasn't that cheap. I had to put a driveway in for some gold, right? I tip in silver. And tipping people is definitely an excellent way to spread the word. And that's why I'm gonna scarf up a bunch of those 1,000th of an ounce Goldbucks and maybe some of those little silver guys. It's a great way to spread the word. So I'll end it at that. Sorry for rushing through things, but that's actually not bad. And open up for questions. I'd rather spend more time and answer questions. Yeah?
Yes, when you centralize the location of the assets, like gold, that gives a target for the government to seize it. And are you familiar with the fate of Eagle in the late 2000s?
I'm not familiar with the fate of Eagle, but you're absolutely right, right? If you centralize it, you have issues, which is, again, why I said we don't want there to be one system. We want there to be multiple ones. In terms of Kinesis, they're increasingly headquartering themselves in Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein has strong laws against government seizures. And in fact, they have an excellent record of that. They also have diversified the jurisdictional risk. They have vaults in, I think it's 13 vaults in 9 different countries. One was added recently in Panama. The vault was a pre-existing vault, but they partnered with a local vault. So that helps diversify it. They do not have a vault in Canada. I was glad of that. But you're right. And that's why first off, I didn't say it in here, I meant to. Everyone should have physical at home. That's the first stop, right? Using systems like this is more like having a checking account. You don't move necessarily all your retirement savings in there, just enough, because physical at home is not as liquid as something like this is, and you can't use it with a debit card. But you're right, that's definitely something to look at with the different systems. Where are they vaulting? What kind of protections do they have? I know Kinesis, they had a vault in China, and when China started to say certain things, they drew down that vault. They allowed redemptions. They didn't make any additional deposits. Some of it they moved over to a different vault in a different country to manage that jurisdictional risk. And that's definitely something to keep an eye out for these systems. Yeah, Dan.
How can someone pay interest on metals when they have ongoing expenses for storage and other things?
No, that's a good question. And it's funny, when I describe this system to people, they're like, that's gotta be a scam, right? No, but the math works out. So let's say I send you 100 KAU. There's a transaction fee of 0.45%. So it's that 0.45% that gets carved out of that 100 and goes into the fee pool. And then that gets divided up. I didn't mention it, but yeah, 15% goes back to the holders, but there's a percentage, and I don't know if it's 7.5%, 15%, that goes to pay the storage and the insurance cost. Additionally, this company is basically a sister company of Allocated Bullion Exchange. Allocated Bullion Exchange came first, and so the metal that comes into the system allocated bullion exchange is selling that to come onto the system, and that provides cash flow as well. So it's actually interesting because this company, if you want to redeem it, they're happy to have you redeem it. They say over and over, we're happy. And then sure enough, whenever I do a redemption, they say, where do you want us to send it to? Because what's happening is the silver has to come into the system, so they make some money on that. And then when you redeem it, it comes to you. And so, if there's still demand for that, somebody else has to add it to the system. Because their main business was selling silver to people, here's your silver, so. Yeah.
You mentioned a few times that the futures markets are somehow used to manipulate the price of gold and silver. I don't get that. Could you explain how that works?
Yeah, so in terms of evidence of this, well, JP Morgan settled for a $920 million fine, and they were called a criminal enterprise. And that was, the stuff that happened was back in the 2011 era. Now, what they admitted to was spoofing, which is where you may not be trying to make it go down, you're making a directional bet. So a lot of the big banks have hedging exempt, like normally for you to short the market, to sell a short contract, you need to have the physical to back it. And producers will use this to hedge their production. So we're gonna sell a futures contract right now at this price, and then 2 months down the road when it comes up for delivery, we'll deliver the gold onto the market to have that. And, well, the major ETFs, GLD and SLV, the custodians, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, they're the custodians for that, so they have these big hedging exemptions. What that means is they can go put a lot of short contracts out on the market. And the futures market is highly leveraged in the sense of, there's margin requirements. So you can buy $1 million of gold, but only have, $50,000, $100,000 in your account. Well, if the gold price comes down, what that means is you can get to the point where you're gonna get a margin call. So what they traditionally do is say, okay, I know if the price goes down this much, I'm gonna get a margin call, so I'm gonna put a stop. If the price drops to there, I'm gonna sell my contract. And so what they can do is, the big banks can put in a bunch of shorts, dump them on there. We don't care what the price is, market order, just sell all these. Causes the price to drop. They hit that stop. Some hedge fund, stop gets triggered, they sell. That drops the price. Then another hedge fund, it hits that stop, sells. And you can see this, like Sunday night, $4 billion gets sold, and it just goes, you have these cascading stops that it goes down. And just all these guys that were, long gold, they're out. They got their stops hit. And then the guys that sold those $4 billion to cause that, close them at the bottom.
Closing means
Close their short position. So basically they sold short at this level, which then dropped the price, triggered a bunch of stops. And then once those are stopped out, then they can close the short.
So they do that just to make money, and that's basically, it's just like a pure.
I can't read their motivations. Some people say they're doing it to manipulate the price down. I don't know. But the conviction for JP Morgan was what I described, but they would do it on the way down, on the way up as well. So it wasn't a directional, we're trying to keep the price down. It was, but my point is, by doing that, I mean, I got like PTSD from this, right? Because like all my assets are in this. And I'll be watching the price like grind higher, and I'm like, oh my God, it could happen anytime. And sure enough, red candle down $1 of silver within 2 minutes. And you're like, what the hell? So that volatility then it's like starts going up. You're like, man, I'm selling now before they hit it again.
Wasn't part of the problem they oversold the paper version of the shares by like 80-1 for the physical allocation, like their unallocated shares?
Well, yeah, so there's a number of different things. I mean, in terms of the futures market, if you look at the volume that gets traded versus how much do they have in stock, 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1. It's people trading on the price movement, not taking delivery. But yeah, then there's also the issue if there's allocated gold where it's, if you have an allocated gold position, there is a bar with a number with your name on it. If it's unallocated, there isn't one with your name on it. It's just this big pool of gold here, they owe me 1,000 ounces, right? but they can wind up selling that claim multiple times, just like back, fractional reserve banking, right? Where you have a certain amount of bank deposits, you lend that back out, you lease it to someone else, and so there's 3 claims, and it's fine until they all show up, and then you have a bank run. And that's actually the really good analogy is the bank runs in the Great Depression. That's about what we're gonna see in the gold market, I think, is where all these people realize it's not all there. I have a claim, but there's a lot of claims out there. I'm gonna go cash in my claim right now. Yeah.
So that's the tale of the criminal bank organization manipulating silver. What was the silver squeeze and what was the theory behind it?
So this is actually kind of how we got our start and how I got involved with Marion is, so you guys remember GameStop, right? Bunch of naked shorts on GameStop, and the Wall Street Bet said, we're gonna teach them a lesson, and they did. They caused billions of dollars losses for a hedge fund, and naked short is illegal, I think. I think they were able to do it on technology, but there was 140% more shares sold than the shares existing in GameStop, right? It was crazy. And the Wall Street Bet guys had these guys, and these guys were so arrogant, they just kept, we're not closing them. And they're like, okay, we're gonna keep running it up. So we, a number of us who were very active in the silver market saw that, and active, from a philosophical level for sound money, we saw that and said, these guys, we gotta tap into these guys because, hitting Citadel is one thing, but we're talking about, hitting fiat, hitting this fractional reserve system for gold and silver. This is far bigger than GameStop. And I tried to make a post talking about that, talking about the fourth turning. A number of us were talking about it and trying to get in there. And one guy did manage to get in there because he was already in there. Guy Happy Hawaiian, which I've talked a lot to on Twitter. And he wrote a post saying, here's the big squeeze. And he described kind of what I'm talking about, like the fractional system and all that stuff. And it was really interesting because his post got a lot of great feedback. There was a big contingent on Wall Street Bets, they called them the silver surfers, that were very active in the silver markets. Got a lot of great feedback. Next day, they were accusing him and the others of being JPM stooges, etc. And they got shut off, they got censored. So a bunch of people left Wall Street Bets and formed Wall Street Silver, and then more joined in. And that's really been growing ever since then. Then it was weird, like a week later, those turned out the original mods had been taken over by some other mods, and those mods got kicked out by, Reddit did the right thing and replaced them with the original mods. Anyway, that spout of censorship was really fishy, right? But anyway, so after that post, over that weekend, gold or silver shot up to $30. The retail stores had to shut down over the weekend because over the weekend, if you sell enough, you hedge, most of these big guys, they'll hedge their position. And if you sell enough, you're no longer hedged. You're naked at that. You've got a naked position at that point. And so they had to stop selling. They were selling so much silver that weekend. So that was the silver squeeze, the initiation of the silver squeeze. It was really led on Reddit and then also on Twitter. There was hashtag silver squeeze. I saw this happening and said, this could be the moment. And I reached out to some friends to figure out, let's get somebody in media to start talking about this, and that's how I got connected with Marion. And some time went by and we realized we need to start a nonprofit to work on this issue of sound money. Thanks. Yes?
So, the reason why asset-backed digital currencies wasn't happening 5 years ago was, as far as I remember, some legal issues. Do you know what's different now that is allowing them to sort of deliberate in a way that they didn't 5 years ago?
I don't know that so when you say legal issues, I don't know that there was legal issues from that, but it was I would say very tough thing to do because of the lack of regulatory framework, and so it was kind of risky. So I know Kinesis started working in Cayman Islands because they had the freedom to do stuff. Liechtenstein passed a blockchain act recently that allows the asset, if you have a digital token that represents ownership in a physical asset, Liechtenstein passed a law giving it legal rights to that asset. You know, the token holder has legal rights. So I think that's probably what you're hinting at is, you know, there hasn't been, it wasn't that people couldn't do it, it's that it was kind of hard to get people to believe that this stuff was safe, right? But now with Liechtenstein passing that act and starting to have a better legal framework, I think that's enabled people to get further. There's also been there's a lot of technical issues as well to doing this because you know, you can't just go write the code and throw it out there. You have to handle the physical side of it as well, and you have to have audits, and you have to, you know, be able to encourage people to trust you. And you know, but PAX-G I think has been around for a while. My issue with PAX-G is the redemption limits are super high. So that doesn't meet my criteria of being an asset-backed digital currency. That's more, it's more like an ETF where you're holding some gold through that system. Yes?
Yes, do you support legislation to set up legal tender laws for precious metals? And how does that balance with the game theory of governments preferring fiat money because they know their absolute debt will be less because it's being printed, and if they spend 10,000 now and it's printed and they pay it back later, they're paying back less.
So I do not support legal tender laws for gold and silver, and let me explain that. Legal tenders basically says you must accept this. Okay, it's a force, and that you know, the dollar has legal tender status where if someone wants to pay you dollars, you have to accept it. Right now, someone doesn't have to accept gold, but they can. That's the way it should be. That's the way it should be for the dollar as well. So I'd be for a repeal of the legal tender status of the dollar, but not to make legal tender status for Bitcoin or crypto or all that stuff. I am working with our organization is working with Sound Money Defense League, who is active on state issues for sound money quite a bit, and we're really excited about that. We floated the idea of having New Hampshire Treasury be able to hold gold in the depository. I floated that by Senator Bradley, and he was receptive. It's too late in the cycle probably, but he was receptive to that, so that's something we're going to work on. So very supportive of state legislation. Yeah, in terms of the ability to print the money, that's the beauty. Is like there's no hope of getting the federal government to adopt this, but states, yeah, you can. I mean, they can't like the Constitution says they can't coin, right?
Unless it's gold and silver, is what the Constitution.
Well, the states can't coin.
Well,
the federal government can't coin unless it's gold and silver. But yeah.
Right, New Hampshire had silver as legal money from 1784 until 1950.
Right.
And then they repealed the section of the Constitution that said Congress had to calculate all debts in silver. I didn't know if you thought there was a game theory of introduction of legislation to support silver as constitutional money. It's difficult to try to find the balance.
Yeah, I'm supportive of efforts to get the states using gold and silver. It's just, I think constitutionally you can't have the states minting, but the states don't have to mint. If there is recognizable gold and silver, the states can accept it. So you could do things like the state will accept tax payments in gold and silver and stuff like that. It's just legal tender, that definition of legal tender is not something I support because you are forced to accept something. But having the state accept gold and silver, yeah, absolutely, be supportive. Ohio put 5% of their pension fund into gold, and I think New Hampshire and other states would be very wise to do that, because you know, the game plan of the Fed is, in my opinion, is to follow what they did in the 1940s. You have a high debt to GDP. How do you fix that? Well, you create lots of inflation, and then you lock interest rates at a low level so that your bonds are negative yielding. The inflation will cause the nominal GDP to rise, and you'll shrink the debt to GDP. The cost of that is you're going to wipe out the bondholders. They wiped out the bondholders in the 40s. And everybody looks at the last 40-year bond bull market. It's over, right? The bondholders are going to get wiped out, and that means pension funds are going to get wiped out unless they pivot to something that will keep its value. Are we doing on time?
Got 5 minutes.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Yeah.
So I guess maybe I'm new to the thing, and that's why I'm confused, because you do see the news stories where the federal government kind of steps in after what seems to me to be these alternate currencies. And so I'm wondering am I not understanding? Because it made me feel for the longest time like they're somehow illegal, or if you use them a certain way, then that's a problem.
No, it's interesting you say that, because I kind of had that impression. Well, and I started this other business, and we got some lawyers involved that were kind of experts in this area. You can't force people to pay you in it, but you can accept it, and you just report it as the cash equivalent. That's all. That's my understanding. Dan, you're looking at me.
Now, I was thinking about the earlier question about e-gold, because that was my first thing I thought of too when I saw Kinesis. E-gold was taken down because they couldn't prove a negative. They were forced to answer whether or not e-gold was used ever for the commerce of child pornography or sex trafficking. And of course he couldn't, because it was all encrypted transactions at the time. This is before blockchains. And they confiscated it all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so a lot of these systems, they're
US government
forced to
can
follow
prove dollars aren't being used for child trafficking.
money laundering laws, and like those child pornography laws. There's a certain set of international laws that,
It's a situation where the blockchain actually protects you, because there is a transaction history, and you can say yes.
right.
To our knowledge, it was not used.
Right.
So can the Federal Reserve prove that no federal dollar notes
Thank
have
you.
ever been used to purchase
Please don't ask them to prove that, because then that's where central bank digital currencies come in. Then they can prove it. Right? Yeah.
I have another quick comment actually on that point. There was a predecessor to the gold back called the Liberty Dollar, which was famously shut down by the federal government. And maybe that's one example you were thinking of. But the folks who built the gold back analyzed the legal story behind the Liberty Dollar, and their conclusion was the reason it was shut down was because they did not sufficiently distinguish themselves from the Federal Reserve dollar, and people were legitimately confused. They thought this was a federal government-backed currency when it wasn't. And they said, for this reason, we're confident the gold back is not gonna have that problem, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, I had some of those. I was here during that day. I had some. And that was the problem, is they were putting like dollar signs on there and giving it a cash equivalent, and no, it's an ounce.
Was that the reason, or that was a pretext, right?
That was the legal explanation. So
Yeah, of
they
course they're gonna
analyzed-
say that. It wasn't actually a pretext.
What is it actually?
Well,
Yeah.
of course not, but
Right.
you know, there's lots of people that make gold coins, a lot, right? And they don't get taken out. Right? It's an ounce. I actually think it's awful to put any dollar equivalent on there. I mean, that's, you know, we're trying to replace the dollar with something else. Put the measurement in there, and it's an ounce. That's the unit. Like, the dollar's a denominator is gonna have to go away, right? People are talking about, what's your target for silver price in dollars? I go, I don't care. When is silver to housing value gonna get to a point where I wanna trade my silver for a house? What's it gonna do relative to oil? Those are the ratios that matter. What it's gonna do in dollar terms, I don't know. Name any price, it's possible. Yeah.
Where is Liechtenstein?
Over in Europe, I couldn't point to it on a map. It's a small
Next to us
country.
is Switzerland, yeah.
There you go.
Is it a country?
Yes, it's a country.
It's a monarchy, actually.
It's the border with Germany.
Isn't it a monarchy?
Yes.
Probably.
They have a parliament.
Okay, I think that's probably close to our time. I'm gonna be at the booth, feel free to talk to me. I'm gonna be over at the brew pub later on tonight doing something for Tim Baxter, unrelated to my position as chair of Citizens for Sound Money, but as just Chip Forsythe. Happy to talk to anybody offline.